Greetings all, and welcome to the 52nd episode of TM Technical Movement. For today, we'll be taking a look at the Sludge Bomb, Sludge Wave, Gunk Shot, Poison Fang, Poison Tail, Poison Jab, Cross Poison and Venoshock attacks, and the Coil, Toxic, and Toxic Spikes techniques. Much as its name suggests, the Sludge attack involves hurling unsanitary sludge at an opponent in an effort to inflict damage. Several Poison-type Pokemon have the capacity to generate filthy, toxic sludge from their bodies, either as a natural body process or as a modification of their natural Poison-type powers. In the case of the Sludge attack, there is little to no modification after the sludge is produced, and it is simply hurled at an opponent to inflict damage. While the impact of the attack does fairly little, the raw assortment of toxins contained within the slurry is more than enough to make young or unarmored creatures extremely sick and inflict otherwise healthy Pokemon with an assortment of different diseases, particularly the poison status condition about 30% of the time. The move itself might not be common enough to be a true threat, but for the handful of Pokemon able to learn it naturally, it is a potent move that can certainly make the users walking plague carriers just waiting to infect others with their diseases. Due to its use of unsanitary sludge to inflict damage, only destroying the toxic projectiles before they hit can prevent damage from the Sludge attack. Otherwise, the move is extremely difficult to dodge. Rocky armor, however, can help reduce or negate the damage dealt by the attack, and metallic armor can completely negate its effects. Despite its crude nature, the Sludge attack is an efficient way of poisoning a target and can more than make the moderate amount of damage it does worthwhile in the long run. Strong defenses and protection against poisoning are therefore highly recommended for reducing the attack's effectiveness in battle. Much as its name also suggests, the Sludge Bomb attack involves hurling unsanitary sludge at an opponent forcefully like a bullet in an effort to inflict damage. As noted before, this sort of move is mainly derived from Poison-type Pokemon that have the capacity to generate filthy, toxic sludge from their bodies, either as a natural body process or as a modification of the natural Poison-type powers. In the case of the Sludge Bomb attack, this sludge is squished into a series of thick ball-shaped projectiles that are then fired at an opponent with enough force to make them literally explode on contact. Along with dealing a considerable amount of special damage, the raw assortment of toxins contained within the slurry is more than enough to make young or unarmored creatures extremely sick and inflict otherwise healthy Pokemon with an assortment of different diseases, particularly the poison status condition about 30% of the time. The move itself might not be common enough to be a true threat, but for the number of Pokemon able to learn it naturally, it is a potent attack that can certainly make users walking plague carriers just waiting to infect others with their diseases. It was this powerful quality that led Silphco to release the move as TM36 within their second generation line of TMs, from which a surprisingly enormous popularity has allowed the move to maintain its status as TM36 within almost all successive generations of TMs, including the recent Sinnoh Special Edition set, only recently being converted into TR22 for the company's first line of TRs, and TM148 for the 9th generation line of TMs. Due to its use of unsanitary sludge to inflict damage, only destroying the toxic projectiles before they hit can prevent damage from the Sludge Bomb attack. Otherwise, the move is extremely difficult to dodge. Strong Rocky armor, however, can help reduce or negate the damage dealt by the attack, and metallic armor in general can completely negate its effects, although weaker Rocky armor is unlikely to perform as well on its own. Despite its crude nature, the Sludge Bomb attack is an efficient way of poisoning a target and can more than prove to be a great attack for heavily damaging Pokemon while potentially debilitating them in the process. Strong defenses and protection against poisoning are therefore highly recommended for reducing the attack's effectiveness in battle. Similar to the last two entries, the Sludge Wave attack involves swamping the surrounding adjacent area with diluted but nonetheless toxic sludge to inflict damage. Unlike the Sludge and Sludge Bomb attacks, the sludge used in this attack is actually diluted with water in the move, so a relatively small amount can be used to forcefully strike every single nearby opponent on the battlefield, and will strike multiple opponents only suffering a 25% drop in base power. Along with dealing a considerable amount of special damage, the raw assortment of toxins contained within the slurry is more than enough to make young or unarmored creatures extremely sick and inflict otherwise healthy Pokemon with an assortment of different diseases, particularly the poison status condition about 10% of the time. The chance is reduced compared to the Sludge and Sludge Bomb attacks because of the sludge dilution. The move itself might not be common enough to be a true threat, but for those able to learn naturally, it is still a dangerous move that can certainly make the users walking plague carriers just waiting to inflict opponents with their diseases, even though the fact they will also strike adjacent allies as well can make it a bit difficult to use properly without creating the same risk for your own Pokemon. It was this powerful quality that led Silph to release the move as TM34 within their 5th through 7th generation line of TMs, as well as TR78 in the first line of TRs, and TM214 in the 9th generation line of TMs, from which it has become almost as popular as the classic Sludge Bomb attack. Due to its use of unsanitary sludge and water to inflict damage, there is no way to directly counter or dodge the Sludge Wave attack. Strong rocky armor can help reduce negated damage dealt by the attack though, and metallic armor can completely negate its effects, though weaker armor is unlikely to perform as well on its own. Despite its crude nature, the Sludge Wave attack is an efficient way of damaging multiple targets and can more than prove to be a great attack for heavily damaging a Pokémon while potentially debilitating them in the process. As such, strong defenses and a bit of patience are recommended for dealing with this move, the latter especially in the case of multi-Pokemon battles where the attack's reckless nature can potentially be turned against the opponent's favor. In effect, the Gunk Shot attack involves striking the opposition with a blast of garbage and disease-ridden sludge to inflict damage. The Gunk Shot attack is a nasty concoction of poison and disease that can easily devastate most unarmored Pokemon and leave fairy and grass types withering where they stand. The Gunk Shot could effectively be equated to a huge ball of phlegm, in that it is hawked out of the user in much the same way, but instead of being formed from snot and saliva, the projectile is a devastating mix of undigested food, poison, and disease-ridden sludge packed into a single ball fired at maximum force. This move takes a considerable amount of time to prepare and is thus somewhat inaccurate, but the sheer amount of damage the attack is capable of dealing is tremendous, and its true effects of the move go even beyond that. For one thing, because the attack consists of more solid matter than liquid, it has the same basic properties as a physical attack. More importantly, the attack has a 30% chance of poisoning anything that it hits, and is actually capable of inducing death from sepsis in lesser creatures within a few hours of exposure, in turn making it a banned move in many tournaments. Overall, the move might be less than reliable in battle, but the sheer amount of trauma it can inflict in and outside of battle makes it the ultimate toxic nightmare for non-steel types everywhere, in turn helping to explain why it was made into TR73 for Silph's first line of TRs, and then TM102 for the 9th generation line of TMs. Because it is effectively impossible to physically counter it without risking exposure, destroying the noxious projectile used in a Gunk Shot attack is the only way to directly counter it. If this is not possible though, the attack can still be dodged by fairly agile Pokemon with enough room. Strong rocky armor can help reduce negated damage dealt by the attack, and metallic armor can completely negate its effects, though weaker armor is unlikely to perform as well on its own. The chances of the Gunk Shot attack being little more than a wing and a prayer in most cases are fairly slim, but the sheer amount of damage it is able to inflict in and outside of combat more than makes it a monstrous threat that should be countered with strong defenses, evasive tactics of the highest caliber, and especially some form of protection against poisoning. As one might imagine from its name, the Poison Fang attack involves slightly biting the opponent with sharp teeth or fangs coated in poison. The Poison Fang attack is different from other Fang-based attacks, in that it actually is designed as both an offensive and defensive attack rolled up into one elegant strike. The Poison Fang attack literally does involve the user striking with poison-coated fangs, but the poison is not what most trainers would expect and is in fact highly toxic. This allows the user to bite only moderately hard to inflict damage, and thus minimizes the amount of time spent in making contact with the target without substantially decreasing the overall effectiveness of the move, though this also means that the move is unaffected by items like King's Rocks. While the Poison Fang attack is technically weaker than even a basic bite attack, it does carry with it a particularly nasty surprise. In practice, the poison used in the move has a 50% chance of badly poisoning a target. This makes the Poison Fang attack the only direct damage attack capable of actually inflicting this devastating stats condition, and is thus a perfectly legitimate move to use in battle despite its low damage potential. It certainly might not be as perfectly reliable as a simple toxic technique, but when direct damage needs to be dealt regardless of whether or not anything happens, this move can still bring the best of both worlds out into the open and make the opponent feel more than a little uncomfortable. Since an opponent needs to utilize his teeth or fangs to execute a Poison Fang attack, striking otherwise damaging the mouth and head can help reduce negated damage dealt by the attack. If this is not an option, however, extremely agile Pokemon can still dodge the attack in close quarters. Rocky armor can help reduce negated damage dealt by the attack, and metallic armor can completely negate its effects. The Poison Fang attack isn't strong enough alone to be considered much of a threat, but with such a high capacity to badly poison a target, it is still a move that deserves to be watched out for and should be dealt with immediately with moves, items, and abilities that can relieve the threat posed by the status condition. As one might imagine from its name, the Poison Tail attack involves striking an opponent with a tail coated in poison. The Poison Tail attack is effectively little more than a tail whip technique that has been converted into a direct form of physical offense. The move itself does not require much physical strength on the part of the user, as most of the damage done is due to the secretion of toxins around the tail area before striking. Aside from giving the move the general properties of a poison type attack, the move comes with an added benefit of being able to poison a target about 10% of the time. While the fairly low chances as a result of minimal contact between the target and the offending appendage may make it less than useful at intoxicating opponents than other similar moves, but the attack comes with one other added benefit that truly seals the deal. The specific toxins released in a Poison Tail attack are primarily neurotoxins designed not to dull the nerves, but actually excite them and make them more responsive to damage. As a result of this heightened pain response, the attack has a greater chance of scoring a critical hit than other moves, and turn compounding the amount of damage it can potentially do despite its low base power. The fact that the Poison Tail attack is only learned naturally by a scant few Pokemon families does make it a bit difficult to use in battle, but the fact that it takes far less stamina to execute than most other poison type attacks can still make it a great weapon in close quarters until stronger or more toxic attacks become available, which might explain why it was installed as TM26 in Silphco's 9th generation line of TMs. Since an opponent must use a tail of some sort in order to execute a Poison Tail attack, striking otherwise damaging the offending tail can outproduce negated damage dealt by the attack. Otherwise, it is extremely difficult to dodge the attack in close quarters. Rocky Armor can, however, help reduce negated damage dealt by the attack, and Metallic Armor can completely negate its effects. The likelihood of seeing the Poison Tail attack much in professional combat is fairly slim, but it still serves as a useful surprise attack when a diversion is needed, so caution and protection against critical hits are recommended for negating the move's most effective properties as much as possible. In effect, the Poison Jab attack involves striking an opponent with an appendage or horn coated with poison. The Poison Jab attack shares many of the same basic properties found in the basic Mega Punch attack, but is otherwise completely designed for use among Pokemon with the capacity to produce some sort of poison. The actual damage done by the attack itself is lower than that of a Mega Punch attack, but its effective damage is the same because the damage inflicted by the thick layer of poison that an offending limb or horn is coated with before using the move. Aside from granting the attack the same properties as a poison type attack, this means the time needed to prepare the attack is generally much lower than that in a standard Mega Punch attack, in turn giving it a normally perfect accuracy rate. More importantly, the attack has a 30% chance of poisoning any Pokemon it hits, and is learned by a far greater variety of Pokemon because the physical strength needed to deliver it is far less than its normal type counterpart. Interestingly enough, the Poison Jab attack is also one of the few poison type attacks naturally learned by Pokemon that ordinarily have no way of producing poison, such as Rapidash and Rhyperior, making it a truly surprising move to see if little knowledge is available on a Pokemon. Not surprisingly, these tremendously good qualities are what led Silphco to release the attack as TM84 within their 4th through 7th generation line of TMs and the recent Sinnoh Special Edition set, as TR57 in the first line of TRs, and TM83 in the 9th generation line of TMs, from which its popularity has only increased over the years. Since an opponent must use a horn or appendage of some sort in order to execute a Poison Jab attack, striking or otherwise damaging the offending appendage can help reduce and negate the damage dealt by the attack. Otherwise, however, it is extremely difficult to dodge in close quarters. Strong Rocky Armor can, however, help reduce and negate the damage dealt by the attack, and Metallic Armor can completely negate its effects, though weaker Rocky Armor is unlikely to perform as well on its own. While it might seem like nothing more than a cheap tactic to some, the Poison Jab attack is a vicious blow that can seriously damage and debilitate anything that it strikes, making strong defenses and protection against poison highly recommended courses of action. In effect, the Cross Poison attack involves user attacking an opponent with a pair of powerful slashing strikes with appendages coated in poison. The Cross Poison attack is effectively nothing more than a slightly modified version of the Slash attack that takes full advantage of the power of the Poison type in its execution. As with the Slash attack, the damage the attack deals is still primarily due to the sheer tearing force of the striking appendage, and it still has the benefit of generating a heightened pain response within the opponent and therefore has a greater chance of scoring a critical hit. Moreover, its accuracy rate is exactly the same, it requires the same amount of stamina to execute, and has all the other combat advantages associated with the Slash attack. The only true difference is that the user excretes a thin layer of poison over the attacking appendage before striking. The layer is thin enough that it doesn't noticeably increase the amount of damage dealt, but it is also significant enough to heavily affect the target's damage properties and its type, in turn making it a poison type move. In addition, the inclusion of toxins grants the attack a 10% chance of poisoning any opponent it damages. While not impressive by itself, this works great alongside the attack's other basic attributes. On the downside, this also means that the damage from the attack is usually completely negated when attacking steel types, but considering metallic armor has a similar effect on the slash attack as well, it's not much of a disadvantage to go from little damage to no damage at all. While the cross poison attack cannot be called a complete improvement over the slash attack, trainers that are willing to experiment with it a bit often find it to be a reliable and safe attack to use in battle when there isn't a significant type advantage on the opposing end and toxic tactics are called for in battle, helping to explain then why it was issued as TM73 in Silphco's 8th generation line of TMs and TRs before being discontinued in the following generation. Since an opponent must use a pair of appendages in order to execute a cross poison attack, striking otherwise damaging the offending appendages can help reduce and negate the damage dealt by the attack. Otherwise, it is extremely difficult to dodge the attack in close quarters. Rocky armor can, however, help reduce negated damage dealt by the attack, and metallic armor can completely negate its effects. The cross poison attack is not very common and less useful in many cases than the more commonplace poison jab attack, but its rapid execution time can nonetheless make it a dangerous move in battle. As such, strong defenses in Pokémon with some form of protection against critical hits are highly recommended to reduce the effectiveness of the move as much as possible. In effect, the Venoshock attack involves drenching the opponent in a toxic fluid that intensifies in power when exposed to internal toxins. The Venoshock attack is a relatively uncommon but potent attack that enables Pokémon that specialize in inflicting toxic status conditions on others to deal massive amounts of damage in battle with their best assets. The Venoshock attack essentially involves users spraying a powerful acidic liquid on the opponent to deal damage. While this liquid is concentrated enough that it deals a decent amount of damage despite the fairly large amount of stamina needed to produce it, it has one special feature that can literally make it a poison type's best friend. When a target that has already been poisoned or even badly poisoned is exposed to this toxic liquid, the liquid reacts with the toxins already present in their body and intensifies their effects dramatically, creating so much agony and pain in the target that the damage done by the otherwise unassuming attack is doubled. This can easily make the Venoshock attack the most powerful poison type attack a Pokémon can possibly have, and is more than enough to make it a worthy move to have around in combination with tactical moves like Toxic, especially since it is affected by items like King's Rocks. It is for this reason that Silphco decided to release the move as TM09 within their 5th through 7th generation line of TMs, TM74 in their 8th generation line, and TM45 in the 9th generation line, from which it has gained a steady cult following among professional trainers. Due to its unique use of pure poison to inflict damage, there is no way to directly counter or dodge the Venoshock attack. Strong rocky armor can help reduce negated damage dealt by the attack, and metallic armor can completely negate its effects, but weaker rocky armor is unlikely to perform as well on its own when the attack is at maximum power. The Venoshock attack may not be powerful enough on its own to pose a major threat, but in combination with a poisoned or badly poisoned condition, this move can easily prove to be a nightmare that only strong defenses and protection against poisoning will be able to counter in battle. Much as the name suggests, the Coil technique involves user tightly coiling its long body, in turn increasing its muscle strength and its ability to concentrate on a target in battle. The Coil technique is a simple evolutionary adaptation that snake-like Pokémon, or those with an otherwise serpentine body, in turn explaining its general classification as a poison-type move, with muscles have developed as a way of increasing the chances of them letting a quick and accurate killing strike on the next prey the moment it comes into view. In effect, the Coil technique involves exactly what it sounds like, the user tightly coiling its long body into a compact circle in order to increase the muscle tension and strength in its body, in turn raising the user's attack and defense stats. In addition, however, the act of coiling its body prepares the user for its next initial strike more effectively than any other method, and allows them to concentrate on their targets more efficiently, raising their accuracy in the process as well. It may not seem like anything worth making a big deal out of, but considering its implications for long battles, this move can easily give the few creatures that manage to learn it the opportunity to strike more accurately with their physical attacks and take more physical damage than ever before. Attacks and techniques that raise a Pokemon's attack, defense, and evasion stats, or lower an opponent's attack, defense, and accuracy stats are highly recommended for dealing with the Coil technique. In effect, the Toxic technique involves spraying and intoxicating an opponent with a super powerful concentrated toxin at close range. The Poison status condition is a notorious status condition because of its ability to be inflicted in numerous different ways and the damaging effects it can have on a Pokemon even outside of battle. The Toxic technique is a powerful move that utilizes such concentrated toxins in that, if it manages to connect properly, it will badly poison a target. This rare status condition is the sole purpose of the Toxic technique, but it has more than made it iconic among defensive combatants, as the damage sustained from the status condition steadily increases as the user continues to be afflicted by it. Moreover, the Toxic technique is one of the few moves known to be lethal even when used under normal circumstances, as weaker Pokemon often do not possess strong enough immune systems to resist the sepsis-inducing effects of the toxin. The move's effects can still be cured with the same methods used to remove basic poisoning and are ineffective against poison steel types normally, but the significant danger the move poses is not negated by these factors in the slightest. This is especially true when considering the fact that poison-type Pokemon in particular are able to use the move so effectively that they never miss with it, even if the target has otherwise left the battlefield for a fly or dig attack. Interestingly enough, the Toxic technique holds the coveted position of the first TM to actually be constructed, as was long ago converted into a primitive TM-like device by ninjas native to the Kanto region over 400 years ago. Not surprisingly, Silphco showed great appreciation for this and decided to release the move as TM06 within the first generation line of TMs. The fact that the move can effectively be learned by every Pokemon capable of learning TMs has made it one of the company's most profitable TMs to date, cementing its position as TM06 within every subsequent generation of TMs up until its mysterious and surprising discontinuation in the 8th generation line of TMs and TRs, though it thankfully was given life as TM06 again in the recent Sinnoh Special Edition set and as TM175 in the 9th generation line. Moderately agile Pokemon, as well as moves, items, and abilities that either cure or prevent poisoning are highly recommended for countering the Toxic technique. Much as the name suggests, the Toxic Spikes technique involves scattering sharp, spiky shards of hardened material coated in poison in an attempt to poison any opponent foolish enough to enter the battlefield. As with the Spikes technique, the Toxic Spikes technique is designed to make life difficult for all ground-treading creatures by literally engulfing the opposing side's area in a multitude of sharp, angular pieces of hardened exoskeleton, shell, or even metal that have been coated in poison. These objects do not do direct damage on their own, and are actually incapable of inflicting damage against opponents, but they more than make up for the inability to deal damage by being a walking hazard to any opponent that treads on the battlefield without looking where they are going, primarily during the act of being switched into battle. Pokemon that are switched into battle without a clear look at the battlefield beforehand will instantly be struck by the extremely toxic barbs, in turn resulting in the instant affliction of a poison status condition. This can further be upgraded to a badly poisoned condition if an additional layer of toxic spikes is released onto the battlefield, heavily intensifying the move's overall effects. This makes the Toxic Spikes technique a dangerous move for any type of opponent, but since the objects are stuck firmly on the ground, flying types and Pokemon otherwise unaffected by ground type moves are completely immune to them. Moreover, Pokemon that are otherwise immune to being poisoned will be unaffected, and poison type Pokemon will actually absorb them altogether and completely nullify their effects. Even so, if built up sufficiently, the Toxic Spikes technique is a devastating move that only a quick rapid spin attack, defog technique, or poison type will be able to dispel completely, making it more than a serious threat in most fights and explaining in turn why it was converted into TR54 for Silphco's first line of TRs and then TM91 for the 9th generation line of TMs. Without access to a rapid spin attack, defog technique, or a Pokemon immune to ground type moves, the only way to directly counter the effects of the Toxic Spikes technique is to bring out a poison type that could absorb and neutralize the hazard. That's it for this episode, so stay tuned for the next episode of TM Tactical Movement. Thank you all for watching this video. It is a great pleasure to share with you all the fruits of my research and all the positives it gives to understanding the wonderful creatures we call Pokemon and how their powers and behaviors function in their world. If you enjoyed this video and would like to see more work like it, please give a like, comment, and or subscribe to the channel so you can get regular notifications on when new content is being uploaded. You can also find links to my DeviantArt page, Patreon, and Discord server in the description below. Please, join me on this road to seeing what the world of Pokemon has to share with us, and the many mysteries and wonders that keep us all coming back for more.